to Walking with Disciples. So today we're going to continue on in the book of Acts, chapter 10. If you were with us yesterday, you know we start out with the first part of Acts chapter 10. And I talked about that this is one of the most important points in the book of Acts, specifically for you and I who are Gentiles. And that'll make a lot more sense today. But again, yesterday we talked about a man named Cornelius, specifically a soldier who was in charge of about 100 people from the Italian regiment. And he was visited by God. This was a man that was God-fearing. He had not converted over to Judaism completely, but he was still praying to God, to Jehovah, right? And it said that he was giving alms, and so he did a lot of charity work. And again, I mean, this is a captain in the army, right? And the captain of the Roman legion. This idea that he led all these individuals, and God saw him, and God said, "Okay, here, this is what I want you to do. I want you to send men to Joppa, and there, what you're going to do is you're going to find a man named Simon Peter who's staying in a house on the seaside with Simon the tanner, and you need to bring him back." So Cornelius, again in chapter 10, the verse part, he sends out some two servants and a soldier to go get him. And from Joppa to Joppa, from Sisera, where they were at, where the Cornelius was at, it's about a 30-mile journey. So they left right away. And so we pick it up in verse 9. It says, the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city. Okay, so they being the two servants of Cornelius, as well as the soldier. They're journeying. They left right away after the ninth hour, because we know at the beginning, the ninth hour, that about 3 p.m., that Cornelius was praying, and that's when the Lord met him there. And so after that point, they've left. So they've been traveling all day, because we find here, this is the next day, as they were on their journey approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour of prayer. So yesterday, watch that one. I explained a little bit more about prayer and just really how impactful it is. But the 6th hour would be about noontime. So Peter went on the housetop. A lot of the houses would have flat roofs, right? So he went on the housetop and to pray, right? And it says in verse 10, and he became hungry and wanted something to eat, but while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance. So it's kind of interesting to me. It's a little funny to think about this, that, the boy was hungry, right? Men, you can relate. I can relate to that. We were hungry. We needed some food, but while I was being prepared, we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. And in this case, Peter was praying. He fell into a trance. So, people are like wondering what that is. Again, it's a vision, right? It's an opportunity. It's a moment. It's not anything truly, mystical. He wasn't floating, nothing like that. Again, we're talking about a vision, very similar to what Cornelius would have just had. It says he fell in trance. Verse 11, and saw the heavens open and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its four corners upon the earth. So if you can kind of picture that, sheet, like a tablecloth concept, right? Four corners, and it's being let down from heaven down. Verse 12, in it were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air, and there came a voice to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Okay. But Peter said, by no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice came to him a second time, what God has made clean, do not call common. This happened 3 times, and the thing was taken up at once to heaven. Okay, so a lot there, and let's quickly kind of break this down to you. So what's being let down is a sheet, think of a tablecloth concept, 4 corners, it's being lowered down. There are animals, reptiles, birds of the air. There's a bunch of animals on there. And if we know Jewish history at all, if we know the Levitical laws at all, we know the idea of kosher, there's a lot of things that they were forbidden from eating, that they were unclean. They refer to here common or unclean. Okay. And so they weren't allowed to eat those things like pigs, pork products, right? We talk a lot about that's kind of one most people know about. Shellfish were not allowed as well. Birds that I'm blanking, carnivores, right? Carnivorous birds, hawks and those owls. They weren't allowed to eat those. There's a lot of things that they weren't allowed to eat. You can kind of read through the law, if they're Leviticus talks about if they're split hoofed, and chew the cud, or if they're not split hoofed but still chew the cud, or and so there's ways to figure out what animals were and what animals were not unclean, were not clean. And if they weren't clean, they weren't allowed to be eaten. But all of a sudden, Peter, when he's hungry, right? Remember that he's hungry, this happens. And so it doesn't surprise me when Peter says, hey, by no means, Lord, man, I've never eaten anything common. I've never eaten anything unclean. And even though I'm famished right now, even though I'm really hungry right now, I'm not going to eat that. But God responds. This is what God has, or the voice responds. We don't know if it's God or not. More likely it would have said what I have. So it's probably an angel. But what's this? What God has made clean, do not call common. He's saying what God has blessed, what God has told you is good, don't call uncommon, or again, unclean. And what's interesting is it happened 3 times, and 3 throughout the Bible is something you and I should always pay attention to. It has significance in its meaning. But think about Peter specifically. When's the last time you heard 3 with Peter? Well, twice. Let's tie that in, right? One of the last time we heard it was with Jesus talking to Peter and saying, Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Right? So, very interesting. Well, what was the first time? Well, the first time was when Peter denied Christ, right? So that 3 times that he denied Christ. So here we have another instance where God is kind of re-bringing that up to Peter's memory and saying, hey, what I've made clean, don't call unclean. What I've made clean, don't call common, right? It is special. It is for you. And then verse 17 it says, now while Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision that he had seen might mean, and wouldn't you be as well? Right? In fact, I had the weirdest dream last night. I won't share it with you, but because I don't want to take the time to share it with you. But you wake up, you're like, what in the world was that all about? And that's kind of what Peter's like. What is this all about? My Levitical laws tells me I'm not supposed to be eating all this stuff, but what is this all about? But it says that while he was doing that, he was trying to figure out what it means. Behold, the men who were sent by Cornelius, having made inquiry for Simon's house, stood at the gate and called out to ask whether Simon, who was called Peter, was lodging there. And while Peter was pondering the vision, the Spirit said to him, behold, 3 men are looking for you. Rise up and go and accompany them without hesitation, for I have sent them. Right? You know what I'm talking about? God's timing? How incredible. Think about that. How incredible of a timing that was at that moment in that environment, right? So because you got to remember, it started at the 9th hour, about 3 o'clock the day before. They were 30 miles separate. They had to walk, and it'd be perfect timing for them to get to there at noon when Peter was praying on the rooftop, and God revealing this vision to him to prepare Peter to go with the men to Cornelius, right? That is God's perfect timing, And man, can I just tell you that that's what we should be looking for? We should be looking for how God is orchestrating, how God is moving in and out of every situation, in and out of of our lives, and trying to move things in the direction. This is it. Tells them to rise up and go immediately. Don't go with hesitation. Go immediately. And Peter went down to the men and said, I'm the one you were looking for. What is the reason for your coming? Peter doesn't know, right? Again, he just had this vision. And then now the angel of the Lord tells them, hey, go without hesitation. There are men here for you. So Peter's like, okay, I'm going to go. But he goes down and he asks them, he says, hey, I'm the one you're looking for. Why are you here? What is this whole thing about? Can I tell you as ministers, and I'm talking to you, Dave, and Gay and Arlene and Debbie and Andrea and everyone else as ministers. You all are ministers. We need to move before we have the full answer, And Peter is moving, but as he's moving, he's beginning to ask. He didn't argue with the Lord. He didn't argue with the angel and say, well, hey, tell me what this is about before I do anything. He began to move before he knew exactly what was going on. He's still in the moment trying to figure out what the vision means. And God's telling him, you need to move. You need to go with these guys that you've never seen before. So he goes down, he says, and they tell him, well, Cornelius, the centurion, upright and God-fearing man, who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send for you and to come to his house and to hear what you have to say. So he invited them in to be his guests. So a couple of things there, very, very interesting. Because again, what we're seeing in chapter 10, remember the overarching narrative here is the inclusion of Gentiles, individuals that are not Jewish by birth and not Jewish by conversion, right? Uncircumcised, uncommitted to Jehovah, right? And Peter does something very interesting. He invites these guys in to eat with them, which is normally not what you would do as a Jewish person. You would separate yourself from Gentiles, but he doesn't argue ever with them. We don't find him, because then we find in the end of verse 23, it says, so he invited them to be guests. The next day he rose and went away with them, right? So as God is moving in your life, I think you and I need to utilize opportunities when God is on the move. He's always on the move, right? God is always looking for someone that he can send. And here we see he moves through Cornelius, right? And then all of a sudden he's moving through Peter and saying, hey, don't call anything I've called clean unclean, right? And he's saying, okay, Peter, this is what you're going to do. You need to move forward. You need to move along with these men. I'm not telling you exactly why you're going or what you're doing. All you're going to know at this point is I want you to go immediately with these guys. And so we're going to see a complete change, again, in the direction of the gospel at this point. And through some of the unlikeliest characters, Cornelius being one of them, and honestly, Peter being another one of them, a man who fought, and we'll see later on, even continues to have trouble with the inclusion of Gentiles into Christianity. So tomorrow we're going to pick up with the story of Peter going on the journey with these men to Cornelius' house. And we're going to see something pretty important and incredible in this moment. Again, this is one of those moments that you and I should always look back to and remember, right? Recall them to memory as a moment that you and I have the opportunity to really be grafted into the kingdom of God. So love you guys. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow.